Hello everyone, welcome to the Besiege bots building tutorials. Please take a look at the previous video in this series if you haven't, because it can be a bit confusing if you don't. In this video, I will be showing you how to build a spinner. So first, if you want to build a spinner, you need to think what direction it would be, or what orientation. Do you want it vertical, horizontal, maybe a face spinner? But for this first example, I will be making a horizontal spinner. Next up, you would be thinking about what kind of mount you would like, how the motor would power the spinner. Do you want it torqueless or do you want it direct drive? Torqueless is using a free spinning axis and a motor on top of it. Direct drive is the spinner directly on the motor itself. So first, I will be showing you how to make a torqueless spinner. And after that, I will show you how to make a direct drive one. So first up, after you use a free spinning axis, that could be this large unpowered wheel, a spinning block, or any block that has an axis that can be free spinning. Let's use a unpowered large wheel first because it is easiest to do. Next up, you have a choice of motors. You want cogs, which you can only do 2 stacks of, or wheels. You can also use big wheels, although they are not as commonly used. But I'll be using small motor wheels since you can stack them up to 3. And they're, although a bit weaker, they're quite a bit stronger since they like more powerful power-wise, since they can be stacked up to 3. Next up, you want to put braces on your motor. You can do something like this, but the shorter the braces are, the more torque they will give you. Another thing to note is you might not need the max of 8, because sometimes your spinner is small enough that you don't need too much braces. You might even be able to get away with 2 braces on small enough spinners, even 1. But let's use 4, because it's right in the middle. And after that, you need to think of what kind of bar you want. Do you want a spin block or grabber bar? Grabbers are slightly easier to do, so let's just do them. They're simpler as well. They're also stiff and hard, unlike spin blocks which can spin. They don't spin, so that's also another thing. So with the grabbers, you do not want to use the sharp end. You want to use the spiky but fat end, because the skinny end is a destructible weak connection, while the spiky grabbing end is an invincible connection. Next up, you want to wire up your wheels. You want to max out the speeds, and you want to wire them up to what controls you want to do. I will be using X and Z. Don't forget to wire up the reverse, because it can be useful in some situations and in fights. I will be toggling my motors, but you might not need to do so. As you can see here, the spinner is hitting, so I will be angling this down a bit. But you can see that you now have a spinner, really basic spinner, but it gets up to pretty decent speeds, around 230, 240 meters per second tip speed, and 400 RPM. What you can do if you're trying to make a bigger spinner, you can make the spinner wider. You can also just make it longer, although please do bear in mind that if you make your spinner longer, there is a diameter limit for each of the weight classes. Oh, this is a really big, a pretty big spinner anyway. But if you don't want to have a bar, you can also make a disc. I will show you how to do that with the direct drive version. So the other option, if you want to make a spinner, is a direct drive spinner, like I said before. And with that, you want something called a counter gyro. Since your spinner is not spinning on a free axis, it is putting torque into your chassis. So let's make a direct drive spinner. Let's put some cogs here. Let's do a cog motor this time. Let's compress this cog motor. Is it still spinning? Yeah, it is. Let's wire it up first this time. Bring it to toggle. And let's use a wheel, counter reaction wheel. The reason why I'm using wheels is because it's slightly smaller and it doesn't count as an invincible block, so you have more invincible blocks to play with on your bot, because there is an invincible block limit. The main thing with counter gyros is that for them to be as effective as possible, you need to put them at the same block that the spinner or the spinner motor is attached to. This is to reduce the amount of bend that it might have if you put it on something else. It might put strain on your chassis because your spinner wants to bend one way and your counter gyro is counter reacting that force. That means this is pulling and the wheel would be pulling the other way, bending it. But if you put it on the same block, it reduces that force. So let's use a grabber one as well. So on this type of spinner, you don't need a braces on your motor. You just need braces on here, and I'll put that later on. And since I said I will be making a dry spinner, and a disc, I will be making a disc with grabbers. Don't make too big of a disc though, since direct drive, let's just say, it doesn't like too big of weapons. So let's make this disc a 4-spoke disc, and let's make it relatively small. Space these grabbers, each one of them by 1.2. And this would be like an undercutter. If you want to make a disc, first thing you want to do is grab all the grabbers here and rotate them 45 degrees. And then you press this button to go to the center of mass of everything, and then you press the lock button. Now you want to lower this down to, let's say, 15 degrees. So what this does is it rotates them to a certain amount. If it's 11.25, of course it's going to be less. If it's 15, it's going to be more. And you need to adjust this on how big your spinner is. If your spinner is bigger, of course you'll need less of a degree on this bit. If you have a smaller spinner, you'll need more. So if the kind of space is too much, like so, you'll need to reduce the amount, and if the space is too little, like so, you need to raise it up. 15 seems like a good amount on this disc, so let's use 15. Then after you've done about 45 degrees of angle on each side, select the inner ones again, and you flip them. But oh, it's doesn't line nicely, so let's just do a bit more angle on these ones. Make it, let's just say 17.5. You can adjust these on your own numbers. You can also use the scroll wheel. I just removed the old setting. But you can also type them in by double clicking them to select them, and then you just put it in. Or you can just click and backspace. So let's do 17.5, which is 2.5 extra. I cannot do the maths. So you just rotate these a bit more until they seem nice. Seems good enough actually. Otherwise, since this is not nicely aligning, I will extend these grabbers outwards by a bit. Of course, discs are a bit more complicated. Oh, now you see here, one side is expanding while the other isn't, because their orientations are a bit different. So I'll be expanding one side and then the other. Let's go with 20. It's good for your if you want to adjust something instead of like counting in a smaller thing, it's just raising up and down the values here. So you just do it on the other side by one tick again. So that's a lot easier than just counting with 4 ticks of 0.5. It's easier to just do 1 tick of 0.2. Next up is a matter of teeth. Thus, the easiest way of doing teeth is just the grabbers poking out there. Discs are heavier blockwise, so that's another thing to think about. And let's actually wire up the spinner now. So XZ this. Let's also not pin the spinner. And as you can see, since I don't have a counter gyro, the spinner, because the disc is heavier, is spinning the log instead of actually spinning the disc, which is a bit annoying. What you want to do is put some braces on this counter gyro, and you just lower these down, and this becomes a reaction wheel. As you can see now, it eventually stops, and its counter reaction wheel is a bit too fast because it is spinning the other way. So realistically, if you have something like wheels on, let's just say this is going to be an undercutter, although this is just for an example. The purpose of this is just for an example. If you have something like wheels here, just imagine there are wheels there because it is hitting the spinner. You would want to make the spinner or the wheels further back, or just the spinner a bit lower from your chassis. So just say, let's just say you have wheels there. Yeah. So if this when it spins up, it's spinning this way or clockwise, but it starts spinning counterclockwise. So when it spins like the other way, that means it has too much. Like if it's spinning counterclockwise, then it's too much. If it's still spinning clockwise, then it's not enough. So since it's too much, I can just lower this down. But if it's not enough, you can just add more stacks to the counter reaction wheel or add more braces. So let's try with 1.8 here. And it is still too much. Let's go with 1.5. It is also still too much. Let's try maxing out with 2. As you can see here, 2 is not enough. So I would need more. So if you want to do 3, you can just do 30-degree increments here. Actually, 60 would make more sense. And it lets you do 3, like this. And then this is 6, right? The trick here is to just remove one set of these, and you have 3 symmetrical braces. Very nice. Like I said, you can see that direct drive spinners are much more complicated to make. And whoa, perfect, 1.5 seems about right. You would probably just make it a bit more optimized and such. But let's just say 1.5 is not as perfect, because it still rotates a bit. But you will eventually find a sweet spot by moving maybe 0.5 or 0.5 down. So it requires some fine tuning, and that's why direct drive spinners are a bit more complicated. If this was a vertical, I would recommend testing in 0G, and if you want the best results, I guess, you can test this in 0G as well, by pinning it down and spinning it up, and then releasing the pin. Gives you the best results and the most accurate results, since you're not hitting anything, and it's in 0G. So that's the basics for spinner building. Thank you for watching. If you want to learn more, watch the next ones, and see you next time.